It's time to break down the Buffalo Bills Week 2 opponent, the challenges they present, and what the Bills need to do to deal with them today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, folks, welcome in. We're going to get ready for Bills Dolphins on Thursday Night Football on this episode. But real quick, we finally got the numbers for the Spencer Brown contract extension. And so I want to share them with you here to get this episode kicked off. Spencer Brown signed a 4-year, $72 million contract extension with the Bills. That's $18 million average per season, $19.855 million guaranteed. And Greg Thompson does a great job of explaining contracts and salary cap. And his analysis on this deal breaks it down like this. It's practically a 3-year, $38.8 million deal through 2026. And then after that, the Bills have a lot of flexibility to get out of the contract if things aren't working out. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing is just how small of this deal is guaranteed. And I think that certainly has a lot to do with Spencer Brown and perhaps his injury history and a bit of a calculated risk moving forward that those problems won't come up in the future and cause him to miss some time. And so this deal makes Spencer Brown the 13th highest paid offensive tackle in the NFL in terms of the contract's total value. If you break it down in terms of average annual salary, Spencer Brown ranks 17th at $18 million a season. That puts him right there with other offensive tackles like Colton Miller, Cam Robinson, Taylor Moton, Titus Howard. And I think that's probably a pretty fair stratosphere for him to be placed. Now, one thing, like I mentioned, the guaranteed money here is interesting. Of the top 20 highest paid offensive tackles in the NFL in terms of average annual salary, Spencer Brown has the lowest amount of guaranteed money in terms of the percentage of it. So when I think about this deal, I think of it as a fair deal for both sides, given the total contract value, the average annual salary, and then the flexibility baked in due to the minimal guarantees on this deal for Buffalo. After this deal, my estimation is that the Bills have about $4.7 million in available cap space as of right now. All right, let's get into this matchup, Thursday Night Football. The Buffalo Bills are on the road in Week 2 to face the Miami Dolphins. The game will be played on Thursday, September 12th, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The game will be broadcasted on Amazon Prime. Al Michaels on the play-by-play. Kirk Herbstreit is the game analyst. Kaylee Hartung is the sideline reporter. This will be the 122nd all-time meeting between the Bills and the Dolphins. And the Bills have an all-time record of 58-62-1 against Miami. The Bills, of course, have won the last 4 and 13 of the last 15 against Miami. The Bills enter this game 1-0, of course, defeating the Arizona Cardinals in Week 1. Miami is also 1-0. They beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 20-17 in Week 1. Interesting game. They were down 17-7 late in the third quarter, and the Jags were about to score a touchdown, literally about to score a go-ahead touchdown, or touchdown to go ahead 24-7. And Javon Holland knocks the ball out of Travis Etienne's hands as he's about to score a touchdown. The Dolphins recover. The very next play is an 80-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill, and they score a touchdown. Miami scores 13 unanswered points the rest of the way to close out the win. So Miami found a way, got a big defensive play, turned that into a big offensive play, hit a couple of field goals, won a football game. Head coach of the Miami Dolphins is Mike McDaniel. He's 41 years old. They just signed him to a contract extension that ties him to the team through 2028. He's in his third season with the Dolphins. They went 9-8 his first year, 11-6 his second year. They went to the playoffs in both seasons, and they have a 21-14 overall mark in his first two seasons plus one game to this point. He comes up under the Kyle Shanahan tree of coaches. So that style of offense that you see with the Rams, the Texans, the 49ers, the Dolphins, that's definitely a unique style of play offensively. Quarterback is Tua Tagovailoa, 26 years old, number 5 overall pick in 2020 out of Alabama by the Miami Dolphins. 6'1", 225 pounds. Looks like he dropped some weight, though, from last year. So he slimmed down a bit. And, last year he kind of bulked up, and that was to help him stay healthy, which he did. He didn't miss any time last year. And you could tell, though, that it came at the expense of some athleticism and some movement. So he's dropped some weight and, has some more quick twitch about him. He has started 52 career games. Miami is 33-19 in those starts, 20-11 under Mike McDaniel. In 2023, Tua completed 69% of his passes. He led the NFL in passing yards with 4,624, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. When I think about Tua Tagovailoa and the quarterback that he is, I think about accuracy. He's a very accurate quarterback. He's what I would label as elite in terms of anticipatory throws. Very good anticipation thrower. Thrives with spot throws, timing, pre-snap reads, and just a good understanding of coverage rotation. And he kind of has a great feel for where the space is going to be, and he gets the ball out extremely fast. Over the last few years, been one of the quickest triggered quarterbacks in the NFL, around 2.35 seconds average time to throw. And that is a testament to, of course, the scheme and the style of play that Miami has, but he's also very smart in terms of understanding where space is going to be and getting the ball to those spots. A ton of anticipation with his throws, and he's got very good ball placement. Now, because of that, it leads to a high percentage of throws to his first read. And that is not necessarily a knock on Tua. I guess you can think of it that way, but that's not the intent of me saying that. It speaks to his ability to diagnose pre-snap and turn that into quick, fast post-snap decisions. And, of course, when you're playing Tua and the Miami Dolphins, you want to try to get him out of that. That's where if they can just anticipate and throw and get the ball out into these explosive receivers, it's going to be a long day for you. And Tua doesn't have a big arm, right? He's not a guy that's going to generate a ton of velocity on his throws, but that doesn't mean he can't throw the ball down the field. He's got a very good deep ball and, of course, explosive receivers in Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. And so, your job here as a defense is to force Tua to work deeper into the snap. And Miami does a good job of building their scheme around Tua by maximizing his skill set, which is timing, anticipation, pre-snap reads with scheme, right? A lot of creativity with motions and how they get into their plays, but then also the speed that they have at wide receiver. And Tua's got a very efficient, quick, compact release. He puts the ball, accurately to these receivers who can run extremely fast. It's a very difficult blend of things to have to deal with if you're a defense. Week 1 was interesting for Tua and the Miami offense. Tua averaged 5.8 air yards per attempt, which is very low relative to the rest of the NFL. But simultaneously, he had the most deep throws, had 6 throws of 20 yards or more down the field. So he'll attack you down the field. He'll attack you with the short stuff. And, of course, speed is the problem you got to deal with once he completes those passes. One thing that I thought was fascinating was Jacksonville's approach to playing Tua. They played man coverage on 73.2% of snaps, which is crazy to me. And it's really high relative to the rest of the NFL, almost 30% higher than any other team in week 1 in terms of percentage of snaps in man coverage. Tua went 23 of 37, 338 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. He had an 80-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill, had a 63-yard bomb to Jaylen Waddle, and they were close on a couple of other deep shots as well. So a lot of potency to this Miami passing game, and Tua is the trigger man for this offense, and he's got a lot of explosive players that he can get the football to. We'll tell you all about them here on the other side of it and what the Bills need to do defensively to handle this Miami offense, so be sure to stick with me. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, got a little something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. The offensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins is Frank Smith, 43 years old. Third season is in Miami. Of course, Mike McDaniel is your play caller. Want to get into some numbers here that are interesting to me in studying Miami's offense. Of course, last year, a lot of production, second in the league in scoring, first in total yards. Against Jacksonville, they only scored 20 points, but they were 8 of 16 on third down, 0 for 2 on fourth down, 1 for 2 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Got 400 total yards, 319 of that passing. They ran the ball 25 times for 81 yards. And I don't think that run game was as successful as they hoped it would be. Jacksonville pretty stout up front with their ability to stop the run. Now, one thing that's really unique about Miami is they're going to play a lot of two-back stuff, and that could mean a running back and a fullback in Alec Ingold. That could mean 2 running backs. It could be Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, and they're willing to play Devon Achane a lot in the slot. And so they're going to give you 2 backs, but one of them is really Achane, who's super explosive talent in the slot. And, of course, he's also got running back skill. So we'll get into some of my keys for success for the Bills against this offense, but I'm really interested in the personnel groupings that Miami's going to play with, especially given the dynamics of the Bills' defensive personnel, especially in the back seven. Speaking of personnel, let's talk about Miami's guys. At wide receiver, got a couple of really dangerous guys in Tyreek Hill and Jaylen Waddle. Those are the top 2 receivers for this team. They both got contract extensions. Or, well, I guess Tyreek Hill got more of a contract adjustment. Jaylen Waddle got a big extension this offseason. They're explosive. I mean, there's no pair of wide receivers like this in the NFL. They are legit low 4.3 speed guys, and they've got real game speed to go with it. Really explosive guys. And I know Tyreek Hill hasn't had his best games against the Bills, and hopefully Sean McDermott's got the right stuff and Bobby Babich has the right stuff to, kind of keep him at bay once again. But even if he's been historically good against everyone else and kind of not as much against the Bills, you just know that he's such a potent playmaker, and you hold your breath anytime that he's got the ball. And so these guys are players that can win down the field. They're both good route runners, and of course, they're dynamic with the ball in their hands. Now, they had signed Odell Beckham Jr. to be the third receiver. He's not available. He's hurt. And so it looks like it's going to be Braxton Berrios as the third receiver. And Berrios is probably at his best as a punt returner, not a really dynamic player in the slot. Of course, River Craycraft is another guy that they'd like to have. He's not available for this game. And so that's why I think you're going to see a good amount of Devon Achane playing in that slot. So while Braxton Berrios might be their slot receiver, I think you're going to see a good amount of Devon Achane. At tight end, they're going to play multiple tight ends. Durham Smythe's kind of been a mainstay for them over the last several years. They signed Jonnu Smith, who's a very athletic tight end that thrives in terms of yards after catch. I don't think that much of Jonnu Smith is an overall starting tight end, but for this team and the style of offense that they play as a dump down option that can generate yards after the catch, I think that's a good player for them to add. And then Julian Hill is kind of a blocking tight end that's emerged for them lately. Running back, Raheem Mostert, coming off of that big season he had last year. I think Dolphins record for rushing touchdowns in a season. Devon Achane, who's unbelievably fast. Now, he's always kind of nicked up, and we'll see what happens. Both of those running backs have not practiced this week. Monday and Tuesday, they both didn't practice. Raheem Mostert with a chest injury, and Devon Achane, I don't remember his designation, but neither practice to start this week. They also have Jeff Wilson, who's been with Mike McDaniel for a number of years, dating back to their time together in San Francisco. He's a physical downhill runner. And then Alec Ingold's their fullback, who they play quite a bit. Now, they also drafted Jalen Wright. They traded up for him. They gave up a decent amount to go get Jalen Wright, who gives them another explosive 4-3 athlete to give the ball to. Wasn't a factor against Jacksonville, but if Mostert or Achane can't go, I think you can assume that Jalen Wright, the rookie out of Tennessee, will have a role for this team on offense. So explosive playmakers all over the place when it comes to Tua's weapons. Now, the offensive line is probably the biggest question mark for the Miami Dolphins. And this is a team that has seen offensive line talent go out the door. And I don't think that they are concerned about this unit as fans and media are, right? It's kind of easy to poke holes in this offensive line, but the stress that Miami puts on you is their skill players and their scheme. And they're just looking for offensive linemen that can hold their head above water and not get killed. And I know sometimes that happens with this group, but just stylistically, that's how this team chooses to operate. And so their offensive line from left to right, left tackle Teron Armstead, he's healthy, and when he's healthy, he's an outstanding player. Their left guard is Robert Jones. I don't think he's a desirable starter in the NFL, but he's gotten a fair amount of playing time as Miami's had a lot of injuries to the offensive line. He's their starter at left guard. They signed Aaron Brewer to be their center. Aaron Brewer is a really unique player in the NFL, extremely undersized. You look at him, and I don't think you'd think he's an NFL offensive lineman, but what he lacks in size, he makes up for in athleticism. And so this is a team that wants to stress you horizontally with a wide zone and get blockers out in space. And Aaron Brewer is an explosive athlete at center, but he's obviously very small. The right guard is Liam Eichenberg. I don't look at Liam Eichenberg as a starting caliber player in the NFL, and the Bills have had some success dealing with him. He's their scheduled starter at right guard. And then their right tackle is Austin Jackson, who was a first-round pick that has had a similar glow-up to Spencer Brown, struggles early in his career, and has really kind of come into his own. Very good run blocker over there at right tackle. So I think their tackles and their center are good players, but their guards is really where I think the talent leaves something to be desired when it comes to this offensive line. Keys for the Bills on defense against this Miami offense. 3 things. And really, I could probably boil this down to one thing. The success that the Bills are going to have on Thursday night defensively is rooted in the defensive line. It's all about the front. You've got to win matchups. You have to create disruption. You have to fit the run. You have to get your hands up in throwing lanes. You have to be able to get quick pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. If the Bills are going to have a chance on defense, this defensive line has to eat. Rousseau, Miller, Oliver, Jones, Epinesa, Austin Johnson, everyone's going to have to play great football. And you have matchups that you can win. And so this front being disruptive is monumental, especially because Miami is going to challenge you with, like I mentioned, 2 backs, multiple tight ends, and the Bills are not going to play heavy personnel on defense. They're not going to play 3 linebackers. They're not going to do that. If anything, they're going to play dime. They're going to bring in an extra safety. We know that. We've learned that about this team. And so if you're going to play with smaller people in your back 7, particularly on the second level, your front's got to dominate. This Bills defensive line has got to dominate on Thursday night. Number 2, how are you going to match personnel? Not a great game to not have Taron Johnson and Matt Milano, right? You'd love to have those guys. Those are exactly the types of players you'd want to have in a game like this. You don't have it. Now, Cam Lewis played phenomenal in the second half against Arizona. That guy's got to show up again. But are you going to keep Dorian Williams on the field? Are you going to bring in Jamarcus Ingram? Is this a game where you think about how can Mike Edwards help us? You got to consider all that stuff. Your decisions to match personnel with your back 7 is going to be critical on top of winning up front. And then number 3, you've got to just keep playing and stay resilient. I feel like I always talk about that when the Bills are going to play Miami. The reality is this is a tough offense to defend, and they're going to have explosive plays. They're going to. They're going to rip off some long runs. They're going to have massive completions down the field. They just have too much speed for any team to deal with. And they're going to make big plays. Play the next play. Stay resilient, because when it becomes a more condensed area of the field, the red zone, it makes it more difficult for them to operate because you have a smaller area to defend and it's not as much space, right? They want timing. They want space. Keep playing. Stay resilient. Play the next down. They're going to make plays. They're too dynamic to stop everything. Just keep playing. Resiliency, mental toughness. That's what you need in a game like this. And so a big test for Bobby Babich, and I mean, a really different looking back seven. That was kind of revealing to me. I was watching the All-22 against Arizona, and I'm looking at these players, and it's like Damar Hamlin, Taylor Rapp, Jamarcus Ingram, Cam Lewis, Dorian Williams. I'm like, what? I mean, you knew those were the guys, but it's like really real. A lot of new people and new spots against an offense like this. Mike McDaniel, year 3, the wrinkles are coming. Big, tough assignment here for the Bills on defense. All right, folks, on the other side of it, let's talk about the Miami defense and against the Bills offense and what the Bills need to do to find success on Thursday night. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, folks, let's talk about this Dolphins defense and the keys for the Bills on offense on Thursday night. The defensive coordinator is Rashad Weaver. It's the third defensive coordinator in as many seasons under Mike McDaniel. 44 years old. His first season as an NFL defensive coordinator, spent the last 3 years in Baltimore as a D-line coach and assistant head coach. And that Baltimore team last year produced a head coach and 3 defensive coordinators, and one of them being Rashad Weaver, who's now in Miami. And so I don't really want to get into their metrics last year. I don't think they matter. Vic Fangio no longer in the mix. Let's talk a little bit more about what happened against Jacksonville. So Miami only gave up 17 points and 267 yards. Jacksonville was 2 of 10 on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth down, so 2 for 11 on possession downs. Trevor Lawrence was 12 of 21 for 162 yards, but they ran the ball pretty well. 26 rushes for 128 yards, and Jacksonville was 2 for 3 scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Yeah, I think the big thing for Jacksonville was they found some success finding explosive runs, and a lot of that was some alignment issues with Miami, but certainly you got to test that this week. Personnel-wise for Miami, the defensive tackle situation, Christian Wilkins no longer part of the mix. Adios, buddy. Their defensive tackles are Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell. Still a very good pair. Sealer's been a good player for them for a number of years. And then Calais Campbell, he's old, but man, he's still playing good ball. Had a sack last week against Jacksonville, as a matter of fact. So a good pair of defensive tackles. And their backups are Benito Jones, Deshaun Hand, and Brandon Peely. Think of those guys as more rotational replacement level guys. They're 2 best players up front in terms of defensive tackles, Zach Sealer, Calais Campbell. On the edge, Bradley Chubb still working back from injury. He's not available. Jalen Phillips, who had the Achilles injury, he's back. He played against Jacksonville, had a sack against Jacksonville. So I'm not sure if he's ready for like a full workload or not, but he played and had some level of impact. Emmanuel Ogbah played a lot of snaps as well. He's been part of the Dolphins for a number of years now and came back on a 1-year deal. And then they drafted Chop Robinson in the first round. He'll get a little bit of run. And then the other edge that they play is Quentin Bell, who's kind of been a journeyman out of like Prairie View A&M. Had a strong preseason for Miami and is getting some opportunity for this defense. But Jalen Phillips, their best edge rusher. But I don't really look at Jalen Phillips as a guy that's 100% right now, although we know he's certainly a very good player when he is healthy. Their linebackers, Jordan Brooks, a new acquisition this offseason, coming over from Seattle. David Long, their best linebacker, team captain. I think he's a stud, very good coverage player, plays with a lot of energy. And I think Jordan Brooks is a nice running mate for him. Both of those guys can really run and play in space. So good pair of linebackers, good pair of outside corners. Jalen Ramsey, they just signed him to a contract extension, making him the highest paid corner in the league. And then his running mate is Kendall Fuller. And I think that was low-key a very good signing. I think Kendall Fuller is a good starter. And nice pair. I think Kendall Fuller is an upgrade to Xavier Howard. And so good pair of outside corners. Kader Kohou is the slot. And, Kohou started off with a bang, but I think he's kind of tapered off. Last year, he didn't play his best football. And I think, you're talking about a guy that's an undrafted player out of like Texas A&M Commerce, 3 different coordinators in as many years. That's probably tough for him. He's played good football, but, it feels like if you're going to go after a corner, that'd be the one you want to target. Their safeties, Javon Holland, I think he's one of the best safeties in the game. Obviously, I know nobody likes to hear me say good things about Dolphins players, but I mean, if you just like good football players, that's what Javon Holland is. He plays the game the right way, physical, runs all over the place, and he's got ball production, made a huge play. Like, he's the big reason why they won that game against Jacksonville. Travis Etienne was going to score a touchdown, and Javon Holland comes in with a flying peanut punch and knocks that ball out and gave that game a whole new feel. And his running mate is this guy. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, Jordan Poyer, the running mate for Javon Holland. You know all about Jordan Poyer. Obviously, late stage Jordan Poyer. And I don't think he played his best football last week in his debut with Miami. He's going to be amped up for this one, getting a chance to play against the Bills. And certainly between him and Saron Neal, who's also on this team, and those were longtime Bills players. And so there's probably some good intel that's been shared. Sean McDermott didn't shy away from that when he was asked about that on Tuesday afternoon. He said, look, yeah, he had the playbook for 7 years. What do you say? I'm sure that'll be helpful for them. To a lesser extent, the Bills have Mike White, who was the backup quarterback in Miami last year. And so that'll be an asset to the Bills to some extent. Obviously, the biggest impact is probably running the scout team this week in practice to give the Bills some pretty authentic looks. But obviously, the processing speed in the way that Tua plays is really different than Mike White. So probably helpful, but I'm guessing that Miami's pretty satisfied to have the intel that Jordan Poyer and Saron Neal can offer. So what are my keys for the Bills on offense against this defense? Number 1, run the ball. It's an important game to run the ball. I don't think Miami has the depth with their defensive line. They got some good players. I think Calais Campbell's a good player. Zach Sealer's a good player. But the current version of Jalen Phillips coming off injury, replacement level, rotational players, whatever's left for Emmanuel Ogbah, you gotta go after these guys. The strength of your football team offensively in so many ways is your offensive line. It's time for them guys to move bodies out of the way and feed James Cook and feed Ray Davis and feed Ty Johnson and run the ball. Number 2 is attack Kader Kohou. I think that's you ask yourself, where's Waldo, right? Where's the guy that you want to go after that's going to give you the best matchup advantages for your players? It's Kader Kohou. That's the guy you want to target. Last week I told you that was Starling Thomas, and the Bills got the big play to Keon Coleman down the field against Starling Thomas. I think you got to go after Kader Kohou. The Bills have in the past. They've had Stephon Diggs. For some reason, they've had Kohou defend Stephon Diggs at time, and that's been a very good matchup for the Bills, but you got to find new ways to go after Kohou. And number 3 is generally stress the newness, right? This is like I mentioned, a defense that now has their third coordinator in as many years. A lot of new players. Calais Campbell's new. Jordan Brooks is new. Kendall Fuller is new. Jordan Poyer is new. You got to find ways to stress that early in the season, right? Misdirection plays, play action. You want to stress them with formational width. I think tighter alignments, and whether they want to play man coverage, and then you with tight formations and bunch sets, you kind of create some natural rubs and get open, or the bunch sets stress the communication and zone coverage. I think you have to lean into those types of things to give yourself an edge against this Dolphins defense that I think had some really good things about them against Jacksonville. So run the ball, attack Kohu, and figure out ways to stress a defense with a new coordinator and a lot of new pieces, new pieces at all three levels. Real quick on special teams, their kicker is Jason Sanders. He's been there for a long time. Had two big kicks last week. Of course, the 52 yards to win it. Had another kick in the fourth quarter to tie it, and that's all after missing from 42 earlier in the game. 83% kicker for his career, but I think he's kind of really been at his best the last couple of years. He had a down year like 3 years ago, and then he had some struggles hitting from beyond 50, but I think the last couple of years he's kind of found his game. Their punter is Jake Bailey, who I think has been a below-average punter in the NFL to this point, but he's certainly coming off a great game against Jacksonville. He pinned them twice inside the 5-yard line in clutch moments. So coming off of a good game, but I think overall Jake Bailey's been a bad punter in the NFL. So hopefully he doesn't carry that momentum into this one on Thursday night. And then the returners, Braxton Berrios is part of the mix, but last week they had Tyreek Hill back there, punt return opportunity and kick return. So when I tell you I have no interest in seeing Tyreek Hill with the ball in his hands on a kick or a punt return, I'm telling you, I don't have an ounce of interest in that. This is probably a game where if they're going to put a guy like that back there, you cannot mess around. You cannot mess around with that guy. So if Braxton Berrios is back there, fine. I'll take my chances. Tyreek Hill, no way. No way. And there's other guys like Jaylen Waddle, no way. Jalen Wright, no way. Devon Achane, no way. Raheem Mostert, no way. If they want to put Braxton Berrios back there, okay, take your chances. Otherwise, no way. All right, folks, there you have it. Bills, Dolphins, keys to success. A nice overview for you on Miami. I'm going to expand this conversation in the Substack tomorrow. I'm going to write an article, a matchup preview. So be sure to check that out. If you haven't joined the Substack, there's a link in today's show notes. I just did an article, Josh Allen Weekly, where I dove into all of his metrics from week one against Arizona and really kind of broke that down. So lots of things happening, not only here on this podcast, but on the Herd Mentality Substack. A link in today's show notes for you to check that out. All right, folks, we're going to have crossover Thursday coming up. My final thoughts and predictions, still more to do here to get ready for Thursday night against the Miami Dolphins. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.